Another weird week of politics, home and abroad. In European elections, the far right have made huge gains, with President Macron of France feeling so threatened that he's called a general election to try and shore up his position. Now, you might not think that this affects us, but the last time the far right was marching across Europe, literally, was in the 1940s. The only thing separating us from that was the channel, but now we've got people who support them actually vying for election in this country. I'm talking, of course, about the Reform Party, who are now ahead of the Tories in some polls. To give you a feel for their ideology, Reform Party candidate Ian Gribben said just 2 years ago that Britain should have been neutral with Hitler, needs to exercise the cult of Churchill, and that men pay 80% of tax while women spend 80% of revenue, and so they're the sponging gender subsidised by men to breathe and should be deprived of healthcare. Another candidate in a TV interview felt able to compare black people with monkeys. 1 in 10 Reform candidates are online friends with a guy called Gary Rakes, who called for a fascist revolution and founded the new British Union, which was modelled on Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists. Farage himself, at his private school, was known for repeating "Hitler was right" and "gas 'em all," and marching through town singing Hitler Youth songs. Nowadays he's pro-Putin and anti-NATO expansion, beneath the jovial man of the people facade. A man of the people whose only real job was as company secretary for a business that folded, and whose subsequent income has been from his time as a member of the European Parliament, an organisation he spent all his time opposing, but was happy to take their money and expenses and still takes a pension. And from individuals like Aaron Banks, who backed the Brexit Party headed by Farage, supplying Farage with a place to live and an income, and worked with him using illegal funds, some from Russia. Nowadays, Farage is co-funded by the co-owner of Reform UK that he speaks for, and remember, it's a company, not a political party. So if you pay your membership, you'll have no say in candidates or policies. Policies that are currently anti-immigrant, but if history is anything to go by, could turn into anti-gay, anti-disabled, and eventually anti-you if you don't conform. The Home Office, i.e. us, are now paying for Farage's security, and he's claiming he should be included in the TV leaders debate because they have 40,000 new supporters. Premier League football clubs have more than that. But what it does mean is that Farage and Tice have earned around £1 million between them. Not bad for a bit of hate stirring. These dog whistle populist dangerous views are given unwarranted coverage, and no one even bothers to question him. Even journalists let him spout his shit without having to explain how he'll do it in the real world. On the few times he has been asked a question, he simply changes the subject and blames everything on immigration. Let's now look at the Tories this past week. Rishi said that Keir Starmer will change the electoral system to stay in power. Sunak's party changed boundaries, brought in voter ID, and increased the amount they can spend on election campaigns. Their manifesto, which Labour rightly called the most expensive panic attack in history, promises to abolish no-fault evictions, something they've promised time and again but never done. Their answer to the housing crisis? Offer landlords tax breaks to sell. They say they'll reduce immigration, but numbers are at a record high, despite wasting millions on a Rwanda scheme that will never happen after 14 years in power. They say they'll reduce NHS waiting lists, but they've just reached another record high after 14 years in power. They attack Labour, saying Labour are the party of tax increase, even though we've had the highest tax burden since the Second World War under their 14 years in power. Also, during their 14 years in power, food bank usage has increased from around 41,000 to almost 3 million visits per month. The court system's on its knees, prisons are full, prisoners are being released early, there's not a functioning parole system when they are released, and they call themselves the party of law and order after their 14 years in power. The Tory answer to everything is to make the rich richer on the backs of the poor getting poorer. But what do you expect from a Prime Minister who thinks hardship is not having Sky TV? The attitude of their class was summed up by Boris Johnson's sister Rachel, who was speaking in an interview about being robbed in a supermarket that wasn't even Lidl. That's how they see the world. Only the less well-off are criminals because the crimes they commit, like tax evasion and fraud, aren't even counted in the crime stats. And one of Rishi's aides thought it was okay to place a bet on the election being in July, just 2 days before the election was called for July. But at least we can always rely on the British press for sanity. At a time when the extreme right is on its rise, there's war in Europe, there's starvation and famine worldwide, and we're threatened with extinction from climate change, every paper in the UK this Sunday headlined, Kate fucking Middleton attending the troop in the colour. that royals wore their fancy dress outfits with unearned medals, and we, the taxpayer, pay £10 million for it, despite the obscene wealth of the king and a cost of living crisis. We're a bloody laughing stock. There's a few things you can do to get better form before the general election. The first is to subscribe to this channel and share content, and why not choose notifications while you're at it? Second, listen to a podcast called The Trawl, because politics doesn't have to be boring. Don't listen to the government lies, which is pretty much everything they say these days. Don't let them manipulate you, and question why they do things and how they will benefit. The third is to register to vote and make sure you have the correct photo ID. And finally, visit www.stopthetories.vote and find out how to vote tactically to get the fuckers out.